Hi, welcome to NDE TV. I'm Peggy Robinson. Today's guest is Graeme O'Connor, and you're a pediatric research. See, I can't hardly say it. That's what goes. I can't hardly spell this. Pediatric research in the UK, and you specialize in intensive care.
That's correct. Yeah, that's right.
Okay,
Yeah,
and you were a hardcore atheist before your NDE.
I absolutely was. Yeah, I was brought up an atheist by my family, so I didn't really have much engagement in the whole religion world at all until after the experience, I had to really think bigger than that and just understand a bit more about religion.
Okay, so feel free to start wherever you like and take as long as you like.
Thank you so much. Yeah, well, again, thank you so much for the invitation today, Peggy. Yeah, my I'm not particularly proud of how my NDE came about, as it was an accidental overdose of a prescriptive drug with alcohol. And this was, I was 27, so it was like 16, 17 years ago now. It was 2006. So a long time ago. And that's at that time I was working as a clinician on the ward and only recently qualified. And had quite a difficult week in that we had quite a few children dying over the last couple of weeks. And a way that I would just self-medicate would be to go and arrange a night out for having some drinks. So that's exactly what we did. We went to a local pub that has a club area at the back of it. And the more drunk that you get, you sort of migrate to the back of this club area. And we were quite drunk. We got to the back of this club area and got a nice area on the left-hand side of this club. And it's at this point that my friend had offered me this very powerful anesthetic that you can have. It's a painkiller anesthetic, and you should never mix it with alcohol. And I knew that, but you still inhaled this, and literally within seconds of inhaling this, my peripheral vision started to darken, and I knew that I was going into this systemic shutdown of the body, the low blood pressure, and I collapsed very quickly. Now, I wasn't aware of any of this. I was instantly transported to another realm. And I was suspended in this huge coliseum that was just made of light. And I was actually in between these two huge columns, but the columns went on for miles from either side. And in front of me as well, there's thousands of these huge stairs that were coming up to the coliseum. Now, I know people talk about the light a lot, and it's so difficult to articulate it because it is like a six-dimensional experience that we have to try to explain in our five human senses. And I know, Peggy, you've had your experiences as well, so it makes it easier talking to somebody who's had an experience. But I think you hear people's NDEs, and they're all so different. And mine was all about energy and light. There was no physical forms at all. And with this light, the only way I've learned to really explain it is that you've got this beautiful white color, but there's this beautiful color within the light as well. And I've talked about a pearl within an oyster before. But when you think about the limitations of the eye that the eye has within humans, we don't see the whole ultraviolet light down to the infrared. So there's this whole huge spectrum that we don't have. And I think when we hit that next level, that's just opened up to us, and we just have this incredible, overwhelming color
So was it
orgasm.
shades of white?
It was absolutely, it's shaded. It's beautiful, brilliant white. And there's because I had there was four beams of energy in front of me, but they were so different to the other shades of white. And whether it was whether the way they vibrate or the frequency, I have no idea. But you can distinguish all these different shades of white that had
Okay,
the
mine
beautiful color
was
within it.
bright white light and a faint outline, like of
Yeah,
arms, shoulder, head. Like you could barely see someone's there. I don't
yeah,
know.
and that's interesting because mine that there was no physical features at all. So mine was literally
Uh-huh.
just these huge beams of energy. So there were the
Okay.
four massive beams of energy directly in front of me, which I'll come back to. But there were also these beams within the Colosseum behind me. And it's funny, so I'm talking like as in behind or in front, but there was none of that sort of um, geographical sort of position. It was all just as one as it was. So these beams of energy were in the Colosseum. They were beyond the four beams of energy that were in front of me. And they were all connected by this incredible beam of energy or light. So everything was connected within these thousands of beams of energy beyond the four that were in front of me, and then from behind me. And again, it's like this galactic spider web that everyone was just connecting it. This is going back to that whole, we are all one energy, and just connected it in that way.
So you were
Also,
right, there's thousands. Like,
it's like, as far as my perception could feel it, and like, people would ask me before, like, were they guardian angels? Were they human form? And I think because I had the same feel as the energies in front of me, I think they were just human forms, but no real reference to who they might be or what connection they were to me at that time, or that I can remember coming back.
how did you
I,
feel at that moment?
God, absolutely. Because I had it's an absolute brilliance and calmness and just absolute feeling of peace. There was no concerns at all, and because you're
Was you
thrown.
was you
Sorry.
thinking I'm dead and I'm
Well, not initially. I think that did dawn on me. I'll come on to when I had that realization that this was unusual. I knew that I was dead, and it was a little bit further on. Even though I'm narrating this in a chronological order, it did all happen at once. But at that initial whacked into this realm, I didn't think I was dead initially.
okay?
But I did have this incredible presence on my right hand side. And again, I say about my right hand side, but I don't think I didn't have a physical form. I was a beam of energy. And it was incredibly comforting as well, this beam of energy that I couldn't actually really see at all. So all the other beams I could actually, well, not say physically see, but I could feel. But I never really knew what this presence was on my right hand side, and I would like to think it was a guardian angel or something, but they never showed themselves to me during that time. Now there was there's four beams of energy in front of me at that time. Three of them were actually of children who had died on the ward over the previous couple of weeks, which again is really interesting because I didn't have huge interaction with them, and why they presented themselves to me at that time was, again, I don't really understand. And as you know, the communication there is way beyond telepathy. It's just this instant knowing and understanding. There's no miscommunication there at all, because you just have this incredible connection. And with the young children, why they greeted me at that time, I really don't know. And I think it might have been I was struggling a little bit with the death of these children, and just any death from this point. I think it might just them to say this is the greater path of the soul rather than their time on earth.
You say they greeted you.
Yeah, I think because that's interesting. When I was in this incredible, like the Colosseum, they were right in front of me at that time, and they're just immense beams of energy. My grandparents had passed before at this time, and I didn't see them. And then my best friend was the fourth beam of energy, and he had died 6 months previously, and he had a non-Hodgkin lymphoma of the brain and was dead within 3 weeks of getting a diagnosis. So I could totally understand why he was there to greet me, which again, to see that energy, no physical presence at all, physical features, just his incredible beam of energy. And again, how you can distinguish that why the children were or why that was my friend. It's just that whatever the frequency, but 100% know that was my
Knowing.
best friend. And the communication with him was slightly different, potentially because we did have that connection on Earth. And it was good. And he was an atheist as well. We were like almost having this joke, like, gosh, what is this? This is crazy. That's when I had the realization that, well, am I seeing my best friend here, the children that had died? And this is like, okay, well, am I dead? Now, I never got a life review. I was just taken back to my last memory with Brendan, and my best friend who had died. And I was very fortunate to be in the hospital room with him when he had passed away. And again, that's an absolute privilege if you've ever had that experience. It sounds,
Yeah.
when a child is born or a person dies, it's a transition that you experience. So I was, when he died, I was in the room and he wasn't ready to die at all. And it was, I was really upset when he passed away. And I remember talking up to the corner of the room and saying, just show me that you're okay. Just give me any sign that you can. But he showed me this from his perception that he literally just died. And then he was obviously moving out of the consciousness, was moving away. But he was showing me from his perception. So I was looking down at me, talking up to him, even though I couldn't actually see him at
That's
that time, but
cool.
I could feel his emotions. And I've learned subsequent from this that you get these shared death experiences which I've never heard of.
But
But
you got that in your NDE,
it got it in the NDE,
shared death.
and
I
it was a
mean,
retrospective. So it's
yeah.
so bizarre. It just doesn't make sense. So I
It
definitely didn't
sounds
feel it
like,
in
I
my
don't
body.
know, I'm not trying to project into your story, but maybe he was showing you, the kindness you showed him at that, like this vision opened up in your
Right.
NDE
Yeah.
to this memory. Because in my NDE, I had memory show up like that, like a vision, like I was like reliving it. And it
Right.
helped me learn something from it. So
And it definitely did coming back. So I think just knowing that I was so sad for him that he had his whole life ahead of him. He had the fantastic life. He didn't want to die. They were desperately trying to get his radiation mask fitted to get to the tumors on this frontal lobe here. They didn't even have time to get that fitted, and he was desperate to stay alive. And I was sad for him, but this, he'd literally just passed and he had this sense of peace already by the time that I could feel that emotion from him. And he hanged around in that room for a while. This is from his perception that I saw afterwards. We didn't move on very quickly. He was there for some time after he had passed. And again, this is when I also had that realization that I was dead, because I've seen myself then in the human form with that last memory. And I was totally at peace with this. It was absolutely fine that I was dead. But I then did have to think about, well, how did I die? Was it in the club? It was, it's not an ideal way to die. There's no judgment there. I didn't feel
embarrassing for a
any
doctor.
judgment. Yeah, exactly. It's just and for my family. And that's when I had the thought of my family. And that's when I was literally catapulted back down to the club where I was. Now, when I said before, when I went to I said this realm, it was in an instant. It was literally a blink of an eye, and you were there. And this is why when they talk about in religion, it's all inside you. This piece is actually here. So I keep talking about I'm going up somewhere, going back. It potentially could be just within us. That's where you go that quickly. But then coming back, I do actually remember traveling through space and time and then coming through the club area where I was before, and actually coming through the bar area, which is a wooden bar. And I could see the wood in the greatest detail, all the splinters within the wood. And I was in the club area. There was no sound. I couldn't see anybody else in the club. It was just my physical body on the floor and my consciousness. Now, my physical body didn't look like this now. It looks so insignificant. And I think if I was in my beam of energy that I was before, it was anything like that, I was just thinking, how am I going to get this energy into this body?
Mm-hmm.
And this is when the fear really kicked in. I remember, like literally moments ago, seconds ago, I was in this realm feeling absolute peace with death. Didn't care that I was dead at all. But now I was absolutely petrified. I remember vividly knowing I was dead. Didn't know what in the situation that I was in the bar area. I remember my consciousness was undulating back to my body. It's almost it wanted to get into it, but it just wouldn't get back in initially. And it kept just drifting off towards the bar area again. And I could see all the scum that accumulates around a bar in the greatest detail. But I just couldn't get
What
it. It was
was
just
it?
that fear.
The scum?
So
What?
I say scum, when you're in a bar, you got all the drinks that drop down to the floor, and it's just grubby
Oh,
and
okay.
dirty. But I would just remember seeing that in the greatest detail, like it was just really grubby, and then going even back into the wood again and seeing the splinters of the wood and getting a feel of what that wood, that oak tree used to be. It's so bizarre that that next
Wow.
level of connection was still there, but petrified, absolute fear. And I could even whenever I think back to it, it's that scary stuck between the realm, just where I was no fear at all. Now, whether through will or intention, thank God that my consciousness got back into body. And it literally made a popping sound. It's a weird sensation because it's so, you need to think about how immense the consciousness is. For it to get into that insignificant body, it does take some efforts. And that's when I was literally, all of my senses came to me. And I could see people in the club, I could hear the music. My face was sore because my friends were hitting my face. And I literally just sat upright, just said, I've just seen Brendan. And that's the first thing I said when I came out. And my friends knew that who Brendan wasn't, that he had been dead for 6 months. So I just looked like this crazy person. But what was bizarre was the time period that I was gone for, because it felt like I'd been gone for 3-4 weeks. I was gone for such I'll call it a wonderful eternity, because it just felt like such a long time to have all this information. And now I was literally just been gone maybe 5 or 10 minutes on this earthly side. It's almost post-traumatic stress disorder from that, because it was just so weird, this time disappearing, or not even disappearing, the time expanse that I had from where I was. I was desperate to get back to this place. I mean, I was obsessed with this other realm for months to come. I just thought, how can I get back there, and how can I emulate what that experience I just
It's funny
had?
because you were desperate to get back in your body. And
Yes,
then when
yeah.
you come
Well,
back and you remember,
only because I was stuck between that realm
right.
that failed. But that's what stopped me from doing anything silly again, because what if I get stuck again? What if I can't get to this incredible realm,
Yeah.
and then you get thrown back, and then you get stuck there? And that was what I thought. It's just not worth that stress again. But I was fortunate in that I did have some fantastic after effects, which they called after they had this experience, pretty like within the first week. Which was wonderful validation, because people always say, well, how do you, this wasn't just the brain dying, it's just a chemical imbalance, which I totally agree is how do we not know? But then I had all these supernatural paranormal experiences that come in following that. And the first one was within a week of me having the experience. It was a Friday night. I was out with my friends just having a coffee, and my phone was on the table. My phone started to ring, and it was Brendan's number. And he'd been dead for 6 months at this time, and he wasn't able to use his phone during the last 3 weeks of his death because of the brain tumor. So I just thought it must be his partner who's just having a difficult time. He's just found his phone and going through his phone. So I answered the phone, and there's absolutely nothing there at all. There's no sound, no noise. But I just knew that was his validation. I've never had a call from him since or after that time. It was like a validation that we did have that experience together. I did see him, I did sense him. I called his partner afterwards and just said, have you given Brendan's phone out? Have you used Brendan's phone? So I just had a missed call from him. And he was like, no one's touched his phone. It's still in the bottom drawer at home. It's not been charged for 6 months. I thought, that was just a wonderful validation for that. Again, about another couple of weeks after that, I'd been at a friend's house who I've been to many times before, had the NDE, and we were having as a Tuesday night, I was having toad in the hole, which is a British dish, which is sausages within a Yorkshire pudding. And I saw a full apparition of a ghost walking through his hallway. No, I didn't think it was a ghost at the time. I just thought it was someone walking through his flat. It was as clear as day as you or I. And so I jumped out, said, Steve, there's someone in your flat. Jumped out, there's no one in the hallway, no one in the bathroom, there was nothing there at all. And this guy was like a 6 foot tall guy with a top hat on, just saw him as clear as day, which is, again, very strange. Steve actually was able to verify or validate this, in that his partner at the time had also seen people walking through that corridor, through the mirror that's in the front room. So that was, again, good to know there's some sort of backup, because you could sound crazy having these stories. And in his flat, again, I had another experience where I was taken back in time, where the windows in his front room were smashed through. And in London, we make the flats a lot smaller than they used to be. So I could see the flat as it used to be. There was these 4 sash windows as opposed to just 2 sash windows. But all the glass had blown in. There was dried leaves just blown around the room. And I can only assume it's linked with the dead man that I'd seen, but I didn't know that they were connected at all. So these
Did
were
that
just some.
scare you to be
Do
back
you know what?
another time?
I found it a privilege to experience it, and even now to think, because people can always question it and deny it, but I know the experiences that I've had are real. But to see it, a full life apparition, I find it really exciting. Again, it just more confirmation that there's so much more to this world than what we can actually see. But those sort of extrasensory experiences for me have disappeared now. I don't have them at all, which is sad. But I'm also quite happy not to have it all of the time, because it could be quite distracting. I mean, I've been quite lucky since I have gone public with my experience. I've been contacted by some researchers who do work in NDEs in children. And I've been able to we got some funding to do research. I work on intensive care at a big children's hospital where children die often, or they will have very near-death experiences themselves. They have cardiac arrest out of hospital. So we've now started a research project where we've been interviewing children after their experiences, and we've had some fantastic results. We've got our first publication coming up in a big intensive care journal, which is a fantastic breakthrough in this field, because it's still very much a taboo subject. Turn this off.
Well, I find it fascinating that because I had two NDEs, one at 5, one at 25.
That's right.
So the 5-year-old, I had the same thing as you did. Like these 3 people were standing by my bed when I woke up from a nap, and they had to be ghosts, because I was like, and because they looked like they were like from 100 years ago, the way they were dressed, like
Yeah,
from Little
okay.
House on the Prairie days.
Yeah.
And as a man and 2 women. And I was like, who are they? Why are they looking down at me like this? I don't know them. But I kind of felt that they were spirits, because I would close my eyes and like, I'm not going to open my eyes, so you're gone. And I'd look, still there. And finally they were gone. I went and asked my mom, who's these people in my room? There's nobody in here. And so that's like you, like all of a sudden you see a spirit, and I'm just 5 years
Yeah.
old,
Yeah,
but
so
the
the fear
things,
was there. I
stuff's
can
the
imagine.
same. Yeah. And then the after effects are the same. And then after the 25-year-old NDE, I had an experience where I had lost twins to a pregnancy in that NDE. And so I was in this morning and my process, and I got done doing the dishes, and I stepped down the living room, and there was my husband with our 3 little boys on the TV asleep. And I felt this bliss finally, like out of the depression, this gratitude for my family, how, cute they are laying there asleep cuddled. And all of a sudden it was 1986. All of a sudden I'm back in 66 when I was 5 years
Right.
old.
Yeah.
But I was scared though, like you were back in time. I was scared because I was in the house we lived in then. And there was this little, so I was knocking on the door. My dad was in there, and he slammed the newspaper shut, and I jumped, and it's like part of me knew you got to get back.
Yeah.
You're here, and it's got to get back. I get out of here. And I felt
Yeah.
stuck. But you didn't feel stuck. You just felt like, oh, wow, this is cool. But it was the same experience, like a slip in time.
Yeah, and that's fascinating to hear, actually, because it is taking back, and I was there 100%. I felt like I was in this another time zone, but again, it was an instant. But just seeing this change of that, the same place but different, as it should have been at that time. But
Was
it just
part of you
plays with your
still
mind.
aware where you were? Or
Yeah,
was
100. Because I was walking through, I had a cup of tea in my hand. So I was walking from the kitchen into his front room. I remember feeling the warmth of the tea in my hand still, but I was taken to another realm instantly.
It's
Um,
funny, we were just walking to another room, both of us,
yes.
and
And
suddenly in another realm.
I was walking through the path of where I'd seen the ghost. So the ghost had been walking through this hallway. So whether I picked up on his senses that he obviously travels this hallway all the time, and I walked through that and just open to it, and then just saw what potentially would have killed him at that time. So it's fascinating, but it's yeah, I don't have it anymore. They've gone these extra sensory.
And it makes
They,
you curious, doesn't it? Like, who was this person? Like,
and I
like you're
tried
supposed
to
to
look it
find
up.
out.
Yeah, and I did. So the road that we lived on at that time, so my friend lived down the road. It's called Cold Harbour Lane. But the road previously, because again, he was I know it's classic, like all with people say it was in Victorian outfits, which I know everyone's like, why are they never in their 80s or 90s outfit? But he was dressed in Victorian, like top hat, dressed to the nines, like really like this lovely big velvet jacket on. But I looked up the street, and the street had changed name from Cold Harbour Lane to Camberwell Lane. So it was difficult to match up the house number because they had new buildings now. So they wouldn't match anymore. But I did try to get some information, because I thought, when I got stuck between these two realms, if he's feeling that horrendous stress that I felt when I got stuck, how awful to be like within that eternal sort of fear, not being able to get into your
Oh,
body, or if your body's been taken away, can you not get into it? um or he doesn't want to move on. That's why I do understand that part about moving, because you're just taking it instant. I didn't have a choice to go there initially. I was literally just there. But people must get stuck in this realm for whatever reason.
that's interesting, because my first NDE at the 5-year-old drowning, I was like that. I was just this ghost kid. And I was, I could
Right.
fly over the highway. I could be here and then be there. And go in and out of houses and that kind of stuff, and hover and gain this knowledge, and I had telepathic voice come in and tell me stuff. And so I feel like I was kind of like there, where you're saying that guy was.
Yeah,
You're, but then the second one, I was through the tunnel in the bright white light, all that's the heaven
yeah,
experience. And so it's strange that, a lot of people have an NDE and say, so therefore they're all like this and this. I'm like, well, I had
yeah,
two very different ones. So who
yeah.
knows what it'll be, next time.
And it's fascinating. I love the idea that, I mean, that there are ghosts, and I bet what worries me is if they are stuck, they've had a traumatic past and they're just not ready to move on. It wasn't their time to shift, and they have to wait for that. I don't know. But it is, I know 100% that there are ghosts and that there are spirits, and it just even gives us just to know there's more to this life than just this solid form that we've got, potentially as ghost form, and then to go to this incredible realm as well whenever the time is. But I certainly didn't have any choice at all. It was just catapulted in an instant. But it's an interesting concept.
So how did this fit in with your atheism?
Well, absolutely, and it didn't at all. And I think coming back, just because I would call it God, just in terms of the light that I felt up there and the energy, because it's almost like a liquid loving from it. It's so consuming, almost tangible. The light there, it's just engulfing. But it's that feeling, that love that everyone talks about. And that what I call God. And then just to know, because I, as a scientist, but we were trained about cell biology, that evolution, this is where we've got to. But then this is when it makes you question, like, why is there more? Why is there something and not nothing? It's such a big question to say, like, just going back to this whole evolution thing, but knowing that there definitely is something else. It's very difficult to get your head around that, to say there is more to this, and there really is. But when you look at evolution and cell biology, you can understand that there might not be, but I know 100% now that there is. And that's when I had to really change my thinking as a scientist to there is definitely a spiritual realm now. But to comprehend it, but I think there are some blocks to say why we don't know all the answers. But I'm 100% religious now. I pray, I believe in God and pray to God, and believe in the power of prayer as well. And what you believe in your intentions. I think there's a big part of my learning coming back is to be true to your intentions, because what we reap is what we sow. And I've learned having those good thoughts and having those kindness, it makes a huge impact on your life. Just being kind every day, you do get that sort of almost karma, that good karma coming back to you by having kind thoughts and
What
having those good intentions.
what did your atheist family and friends think of this?
Well, it's difficult to talk. It's like a taboo subject, so it's not
Really?
something I would go shouting about at all. And that's why when I went public 2 years ago, I was very nervous about it. One, because of my profession, and because of my family. So it's I think people will believe in my story as much as they can with their limitations of their thinking. And I know if someone had said this to me
Yeah.
when I was an atheist, I wouldn't, and even with a ghost, I wouldn't believe in it. But I'm not here to convince anybody. I feel very privileged that I've had this experience and I've seen ghosts and seen the light and touched and felt the light. And it changes your whole life because you've had that experience. So life is less stressful because what the final destination, what it's going to be, and it's exciting to when you get your ticket to go eventually, it's exciting to find out what's next on the next level of consciousness that we're going to be moving to.
Did you hear anything, get any knowings or anything while you're there?
Yeah, no, because it's interesting. So we're not. I know people they can hear incredible music. I didn't have any audio sound that I can remember at all. It was just absolutely peaceful. Or it's all about the light and feeling for me. But with one of the interviews that we had for the children, which we're going to publish, he actually had a young girl that was next to his bed, and she said to him, "You have a bright future ahead of you." And he's only like a 10-year-old boy who came out of this, and his voice this memory of being told that his future was bright, you've got lots to look forward to, which is, when you get it from a child, it makes it so much more pure and just less tampered with, because they've got no idea what we're interviewing them about. We just open it up into all these. We try to use the Grayson scale. We adapt it for the child. But so for me personally, I didn't get any message. But this is, I think, a lot of people, they have an NDE, or people that watch NDEs, they think they need to be doing these grandeur changes in life to make a difference. And it's these tiny acts of kindness that I think are the most important. They call it the ripple effect or the butterfly effect, that you have no idea what your tiny bit of kindness will be doing to, to somebody else's life. You could be, potentially saving a life by just smiling at somebody. And those tiny acts of kindness, I think, is all that we need to be doing. As hard as it is sometimes, we all have down days, but having those good intentions and true good intentions. Sometimes we might, befriend someone wanting to be nice, but actually we're befriending them because they might help us in our career, or they have money in the bank. But it's being really alert to those, what your true intentions are, which took a long time for me to fine tune. But I find probably the most important part of my good energy now that I can try to get back to me.
Yes, I have learned to not respond when I'm feeling angry, to wait until I can feel kindness again and respond from there, because I mean, just because you had an NDE doesn't mean that you're suddenly a saint and you got it all figured out.
No, it doesn't. But we all get triggered, and you're absolutely right. And I think what I've learned also is that if someone does trigger you, it's often a reflection of yourself. So whatever, if it's good or bad reflection or trigger, it's actually probably within you, and that's why you're reacting to it. And I think with the age, it helps just to not be reactive in those situations and take a hold, and having that compassion and understanding what happened to them as a child, why are they the way that they are, to behave that way, or even what's happened to them that week, and just having that compassion and non-judgmental part of your life, but which again is difficult, and I try to do it as best I can. But if you're having an off day and then someone triggers you, it's difficult, and we still have those human emotions, even though we've had that higher.
And it's hard not to take it out on the next person. Somebody triggers you, but you don't take it out on them. You take it out on the next person.
Yeah, because you hold it, and that's why. And that's again a lot of problems that people, they hold these bad energies, and rather than just talking about it or expressing it, and you're right, you'd take it to that next person who's probably a loved one and a close one, because it's a safe space to offload.
Now, this study you're doing with the children's near-death experiences, right?
That's right. Yes. So yeah, we did our first. Yeah, sorry, Pegi.
I was just wondering, I've been saying something lately, and I think maybe you'd be a good person for me to throw this out there too. I wish that in triage or basic nursing questions that there could be something about, have you had a spiritual experience lately? Because so many NDEers I hear say, for example, when the squad came at their house, they had the spiritual experience, and then they're back awake, while they're at the hospital, but they just had this, or they were flying above the squad on the way there, or they just had surgery and they're back in their room and they have their NDE, and then they die again and stuff. And it seems like, because of me with the tubal pregnancy at 25, my doctor said, you're fine, there's nothing wrong with you. I did an ultrasound before, both babies are in the uterus. Like, what's wrong with her? I could not say, well, I know I'm about dead, because I was just in heaven and accepting it. I threw a big fit, and then eventually I accepted. I had this whole experience. I couldn't tell him that in 1986. Never heard of NDE or anything. But if I could have said it, and I'm thinking, could I today, if I had had this experience today, would I be able to say, excuse me, don't discharge me yet, because I just died. So you do some more tests. It's like, if people knew that they could, or somebody was asking, because maybe people wouldn't even know to say it, right? I had this, but to say, have you had any kind of out of body or spiritual experience lately? Even while they're in the hospital or triage or something, to let them know, oh, we gotta almost dead here,
Yeah,
even though
and
there's no
it's having
physical
that
signs.
safe space as well, because even if you did have that experience, you don't want to be sent to the loony bin because
Right.
people, this is it's interesting because we've done the pilot study, which we're publishing, and then from that, we want to have a bedside toolkit for nurses and doctors to be able to ask questions for children. We call it post-intensive care syndrome. And as part of that will be a question, did you have any extrasensory experiences or abnormal experiences? Because we have to
Is that
frame
how
it
you
so
word it?
differently with children.
Have you had
Yes,
any
we've got
extra sensory
that's what we call
experiences?
extra sensory. So, and we try to frame that as in did time travel differently? Did you see anybody that other people didn't see in the room? So from this, we get to try to play it out. So we have a small well play where it looks like a hospital bed. We get them to play out with on the ward, or we get them to paint or draw, so the children can try to communicate in their world rather than with language, which they might be limited to do. But we are trying to develop a bedside toolkit now for nurses. Because the idea also, we want to try to reduce them to have further investigations. Because if you have had a near-death experience, you don't need actually more investigations. This question if there's any problems with the brain, you've actually just had a fantastic NDE. But it's having this safe space now within hospitals for children and adults to say that. And I think it is changing. The Lancet actually published 20 years ago now on near-death experiences in cardiac patients. The Lancet's a big journal, medical journal. So even 20 years ago, we're starting to publish on it a bit more.
Do you think there's any way to get this, what you're doing as far, have you had this other experience into like mainstream to where more people could look at it and see how it's
Yeah,
needed?
sure.
Maybe less
Yeah,
patients would die if they
no, it's a
had this
good
little
point,
heads
actually.
up.
Yeah, I think, yeah, and again, it's having that, once doing it from a research perspective, it makes it easier for me then to go out and try to promote it. So if we get it published within this big medical journal, which is intensive care journal, then it's easier for us to disseminate it at conferences and abstracts that we can send out. But then even going into mainstream newspapers and just having this is documented here, and because that would be the best way to get people aware of these experiences and to try to normalize it and it don't feel crazy, or just to even dismiss the experience that it was a drug induced in terms of running intensive care with opioids, that it actually you did have a near death experience.
I
I
just
think
don't
it's
know.
changing. I think
I
it's been a
don't
huge
know,
change. Yeah.
like, I don't know if anybody's any better off, now than it was, in 1986 here. If they
Yeah.
would actually say, oh, we got a crazy person, or,
Yeah.
check their morphine drip, or, because, and it seems to me like people I know that haven't had an NDE, that say has had a really bad car wreck, they've got horrible PTSD, can hardly drive or have this fear and all this. But the ones that had a near death experience and, maybe even a worse car accident, they don't
Yeah.
feel that anxiety. They don't have that PTSD. And I understand what you're saying. You have a little bit of PTSD from trying to get back in that body
Yeah.
because,
Yeah.
and
But then, but,
yeah, and I had just a smidgen when I of that trying to get back in, like, and I skip over it. I mentioned it the other day when somebody interviewed me. I said, I don't mention this very often because it's just like a smidgen of a
yes.
milliliter of
Yeah.
a second, but I always say, when my second NDE, I was in heaven and I was crying out to Jesus. And I said, who else will teach them about you? Because I didn't think I was going back. They said I wasn't. And then all of a sudden I'm back in the wheelchair in the hospital. But there's this little second in between there before I went back in the wheelchair that I'm at the ceiling of the hospital in the fluorescent light, and I'm looking down and I see I had long brown hair and I'm all humped over in the wheelchair, and there's two nurses behind me and they're standing there talking to each other. I didn't even notice, like I'm humped over. But and something's like, get back in there. And like, I don't know
Yeah.
how. Just do it. Get in there. I'm like, I don't know how. And then I feel, first comes back my hearing. I now hear the nurses talking. And before I had passed out when I died, I had noticed I'd lost contact with my body. I couldn't move a finger. I couldn't lift off I wanted to get the blue bowl so I could throw up, right? But I couldn't. I lost contact with my body. And oh, wait a minute, I'm not going to throw up. I'm going to pass out. I'm going to pass out right now. And my chin hit my chest. And that's when I died,
Yeah.
was up through. So I felt my body come back because, oh, I can feel my hands now. And then something let me know once you feel your feet on the floor, the wheelchair
Yeah.
pedals, you're all the way back. I kind of waited a little bit, like, oh, okay, I feel it now. And so I could feel my body coming slowly from head down back in contact.
Right. And I
But
think you're right. I probably use that PTSD a bit flippantly, same as you. I just remember it being a stressful experience, but I can't probably, it's probably not fair to use the word PTSD, but I just remember it being so traumatic. But like you say, it was knowing where I had been. That was, that overall that tiny part of that very stressful experience. But where I had been was much more.
and
It provided that fear.
it makes you think about the different levels of consciousness, I guess. That seems like a weird thing to say.
No, I totally
But
get that. Yeah.
you had your light experience where like you were somewhere else, and then you had the experience, my body's right there and I need to get in. And
Mm.
then you had the time slip experience where you were in another time. And I know what all those are like, where it's hard to
Yes,
talk to
yeah,
a lot of people and they, oh yeah, I've done that. I know what you're talking
yeah,
about. But it just seems strange, and to see a ghost, to as me as this child ghost running around doing this stuff, and there's different like I don't know levels of consciousness, different realms.
yeah. I totally get that, and I think this is what's exciting about the Earth is one realm, and depending on. I mean, I totally get reincarnation, and we come round and round, but then eventually, I think you get to that high level of consciousness, and you go to another realm. Like the universe is immense. We cannot even fathom how big the universe is. So this is why I think it's really exciting. I think, of course, there's going to be other consciousness or other realms that we can hopefully get to, and but there's the whole question is like, why is there all of this? This is what really troubles me, is like, why is there? Because consciousness is going to be, we are eternal, and if we just set up this playground just because we're just, you want to be able to experience something different from bliss, because we have bliss all the time where we are, we just come to this earth to experience pain and horror, because life, I don't know, it's just it's just so difficult to comprehend, and it's like we're being blocked to really know what is really out there, and the universe just blows my mind.
And even your level of consciousness when you're on the floor looking at all the scum,
Yes,
it's
yeah,
like what's
yeah,
that?
yeah,
You know,
exactly.
it's like it's almost like something is taking us to show this. Or did we do it? Did we decide to go? Like, I had a similar, not really similar, but when I was first in the bright white light at the 25 NDE, before I seen like faint outlines of people.
Yes,
And but before I see anybody there, I thought about real quick thought, and I don't know why. I'd never been to New York City at that time yet, but it was like I was on the streets of New York City, but I was like on the sidewalk because I was like watching people's feet, and I'm thinking, slow down. They're carrying these briefcases and these suits and shoes and all this, and I'm thinking, get out of this rat race, get
yes,
back to
yeah,
nature, and like in the woods, and this isn't how you're supposed to be living. All this competition and money and drive, and it's just like, get out of this. Like,
yeah, and
that's not how you're meant to be. And I don't know
it's
what that was about. So
no,
it's
it's
like,
great.
is someone showing us these things? Like you were shown
Yeah,
this scum for a reason. Like we were shown this, get back in your body for a reason. So maybe we would not, maybe later, like you really miss in that space, that calm and that peace, because
yeah.
you can't just completely miss it when you also had that experience of trying to get back in.
Yeah, no, I think that's so important. Again, I think most people that do have one of these near-death experiences, your perspective on life is very different. I'm lucky that I've got a fantastic career. I love my job, but I don't work overly hard with it. I make sure that I don't keep going for these crazy promotions, because it means you're going to be working harder. For me, nature and traveling is so important, much more important to me than my job. Even though I have a very rewarding job, I love my job after 20 years, but it's not everything for me. It pays for me to do the stuff that's important for me. Going hiking, playing tennis, having that social, side. I think for people to get out, then if they, even joining a book club or an art club, something that they're good, they want to just have that networking with other people, and that connection with other people is really important. But I always talk about nature, and you mentioned nature, and that is my safe space. And I love that walk-in meditation. And I'm lucky, I live in the countryside here, in Hertfordshire, and it's just beautiful. And I can literally walk out of my house, and 2 seconds I'm in the countryside. And I went for a run this morning, and it's just, you connect with the birds and the trees, and it's magic. And for me, it's just, you disappear. And if I have any thoughts that come in, even like, good thoughts, just try to quash them and just live in that moment, which is so empowering, just to live in that time as you are running. It's beautiful. And people don't get to do that, which is, it's so sad not to have that connection with nature.
Yeah, people are living so much in their phones.
Yeah, and it's so sad. You see it all the time. And I get the train to work, and I have my laptop out working, and I know then I'm still not living in the present moment. But I'm very aware of it. And I think because you're conscious that you're not doing it, it's a good sign. I try to put my laptop down. I just have like 10 minutes on the train going to the country, and just taking in all of the countryside and living in the moment.
I can't imagine how rewarding that must feel to be doing this NDE study with children now. I mean,
It's really exciting, and hopefully now we've got the pilot study published, and if it goes into this big journal, it's going to be a groundbreaker for us, and that's when we can then put our next big funding grant in and start to develop these bedside tools, so the nurses, doctors can ask 5-6 questions saying, did this happen to you? Did you want to draw anything unusual that you experienced? We need to frame it in a way that children will understand and feel safe to share their experience, and not think that they've done. Or children will share their experience, and it's just ignored because they say you had respiratory arrest or cardiac arrest. But children are having these experiences, whether it's supernatural or not. But we need to make sure they can communicate whatever happened with them. So I'm really excited about the next steps. And Donna Thompson's one of the professors I work with, and it's called participatory research methods, and that's her specialty. She's brilliant, and it's just such a joy. She contacted me through seeing one of the videos, and we were just so lucky to link up, and then we actually got funding to do the research. We just knew that our angels were looking down on us and saying, you've met each other for the right reason, and the funding is coming through now, which is really exciting.
I hope it catches on. I hope it gets passed around every hospital, emergency room, and clinic, where, we now ask this extra question.
Yeah.
Because I mean, it should be no different than, have you had chest pains? Have you, some questions there. I don't know how it all works.
No, and you're right, and it's so much more common than we're aware of, and it's just if they've had experience, let's just address it. Let's just talk through it, because it's there's a lot to take in. They've had these incredible experiences, and they just can't really process it. So just having someone to sit down with, whether they believe them or not, it's just they can talk through. This is what we might have, and here's this where you can go and read a bit more about NDEs, and there's a whole community out there that can support you.
I was just reading the other day, a husband telling about his wife. They were at an emergency room for hours, and she would tell her husband, she said she started telling him, I'm dying. I mean, she was sick, she was in pain, he was waiting, and then she told him, I'm dying. And so he went and got a nurse, and they just dismissed her. I mean, when somebody says, I'm dying, I mean, surely, come on. I mean, I know people may say that, they think, they're just trying to get attention. They're trying to get ahead of the line and stuff, but she died. She died, and waiting to be seen. And
it's tragic. Yeah,
I mean, and I just thought, I'll just never forget being that 25-year-old girl and knowing I was just in heaven, accepting it. And now I'm back, and my doctor's discharging me, telling me there's nothing wrong with me. And so I said, well, I'm not going home. And he looked at my husband and me like, what's wrong with her? And I was like, I don't know, because I knew I was going to die. And I knew God sent me back for my doctor to have time to save me.
Yeah.
And he wasn't going to do it. So I thought, the only option I have here is to die at the hospital, because if I die at home and my kids find me, and say my husband goes to work. I
Yeah.
ain't having it. So the only option I have is die here at the hospital, and my husband will just get a call that I died. That was my only option, I thought, you know?
Yeah.
And so during the night, I kept passing out again, and I realized that, wait a minute, I'm dying each time here. I wouldn't have any more NDEs. And so I just said another prayer. God, just keep me alive till morning. Maybe my doctor come in, do another ultrasound and find out what in the heck it is. And when he come in, and that's what happened. And he says the biggest tool
Right.
pregs we ever saw, you know. But you know, I just wish that. And so a couple of years ago, I told my doctor, I said, I wanted to tell you something for 30 years. He said, well, you better tell me then. I said, do you remember the two pregnancy and I refused to go home? He's like, yeah, yeah. And I told him briefly about my NDE, and he says, I believe you. He says, after
Right.
all these years of practice, I've come to believe exactly what you're saying. And the nurse stand beside you, yeah, he does too. And so that really,
Fantastic.
you know,
Yeah.
felt good to me, as I want to tell him so many times. And it was too
Oh,
embarrassed, you know,
yeah.
to tell my
And it's
doctor.
just that platform. You just never know how it's going to be taken. And I think the more we talk about it, I mean, this is why I'm excited about to see how this research gets
Yes.
accepted, and just to see what the next step is, where we're going to present at a medical conference. And so that's going to be exciting for us, because if it gets accepted that this big journal is a huge step forward for us. And it's gone through the first processes now, so we just hope for it'd be amazing if it goes through. But there's more journals we can apply to, but
Are
it's
you
a
familiar
huge
with Dr. Melvin Morse?
yes.
Okay. And
Yes,
he
I've heard about
studies
some of his work.
children's near-death experiences too, and as a physician.
That's right. There was I know some controversy around him about how he got them the
Yeah.
data. I'm not sure how that. Yeah, but I'm
Yeah.
definitely aware of the name. But he's because
He
the
was
work he does
falsely
is
accused of child
incredible.
abuse.
That's right. So I heard a bit, because my colleague Donna, who she said his written work is amazing for NDEs and children, but then there's some of this controversy of how he collected some of the information, which I don't know much about. But so that was what. So there is some truth in that, is there, as far as you know, or is it
I
more
think he went to
American?
prison 2 years.
Oh, he did. Oh,
Uh-huh.
okay. All right.
Yeah. But not on what they accused him of. It was like something else. Um, but yeah, but he's totally, like, he's working with inmates now and their
Oh, right.
spiritual life.
Fantastic.
I
Okay.
forget, but yeah, he's back talking about he got his license back, got his medical license back and stuff.
Right.
And he was on my show. He was a guest maybe a couple months ago,
Yeah.
and we got off topic because of the child abuse part, and we really
Right.
delved into that. And he
Oh,
hadn't been
did you? Oh,
open
good.
publicly
Yeah.
about that, and he was so glad. He's like you're reading my mind. He kept saying that, because I understood so much what he was going through. And so I think I've got him talked into, I hope to write a book now about that, going through that kind of thing. And
Yeah.
then what he's doing now, helping inmates, you know, after they're paroled, I guess, I think, to, you know, become using spiritual stuff to help. I'm not saying it
Yeah.
right, you know, to help them recover, not go back to
Brilliant.
their
Yeah.
crime and drug addiction. And it seems to be working. So
That sounds fantastic. Great. No, I definitely heard of his work, and yeah.
yeah, he's a sweet guy. So is there anything else that we didn't get to cover?
I don't think so, Peggy. And it's interesting, because I'm lucky that I get asked to do a lot of interviews. But I mean, you might find the same, that there's a few of them I've done now with Anthony Chen, and then also the other side, where they do the videos alongside your narrative. And I
Uh-huh.
find now that the more you talk about it, it almost dilutes your own experience, because they all put their own interpretation on what you say. And you watch the
Yes.
videos, and of course, they can never emulate what you've experienced.
Right.
And I'm finding now that I'm just trying to cut back on the interviews, because it's just diluting my own experience. So this has been
That's
lovely
why
to
I
do. And I
don't
think,
do it.
yeah,
I
oh,
don't
right.
edit and I don't add that stuff. And
Yeah,
people
yeah.
think that I should. I want just the raw experience. I don't want to put in this picture and this music. And that's not what you even saw. And it's
No,
misleading because they can
exactly.
only pick so many out of this, so many pictures you got to choose from
Yeah,
to go
yeah.
with your story.
That's,
And somebody was trying to teach me to do it recently. And I'm like, you know what? I don't want to do this.
yeah. And I think this is why, I mean, I'm very lucky. I get asked to do lots of interviews, but and I just, yeah, I like the idea this is just pure, just a good chat. And then, because yeah, it's our experiences, and no one's ever going to be able to emulate it. It's, all goodwill, but I just worry now it's just changing other people's experiences and my own. So no, it's been lovely. So thank you so much for the opportunity to share in a safe platform. And I'll keep you posted about the research as well. I'll let you know if it's published, and you can
Please
send it out.
do.
It'd be good
Please
to.
do.
I've got a good feeling about it. I feel like it's time. It's meant to happen now.
Yeah, I've been saying for a while now that I don't know who to talk to. I don't know how to make this happen, but we need to get something in there where they're
Yeah,
asking. So people feel free. Like, okay, maybe no, I didn't have anything like that. But then maybe after surgery they do.
yeah,
And they'll know it's okay for me because they asked. So, hey, that experience you asked me, I didn't have it before, but I just had something. And so, like, maybe they need to start checking their blood pressure or run them back into some test, I mean,
yeah,
like with me, like with ultrasound, like it was fine before. Well, if you've died and come back, we need to do another ultrasound.
yeah.
So, but yeah, and I had one baby in uterus, and the other one was stuck in the tube, half in the uterus and half in the
Ectopic.
tube. And that's why
Oh
it
gosh.
looked like both were in the uterus. That's why
Right.
he wasn't believing anything was wrong.
Yeah.
So if I would have said, but I was just in heaven, I just, what would they have done? Put me in the psych ward or just
Yeah,
roll their eyes
exactly.
more? Might not even admitted me if I told them
Oh,
because they
absolutely.
thought she's
Yeah.
crazy. We're just send her home because I ain't going. That's what you gonna do.
Oh, thank God for that. Well done.
So thank you so much and for the work you're doing. And yeah, I'm very interested. I hope you keep me up to date.
Yeah, definitely
What's
will do.
going on.
Thanks, Peggy.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.